Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Danat Pranams, dear devotees. Thank you all very much for joining in for our Bhagavad Gita study session. We'll start with prayers. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurudushe Namaha Panchadattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yadkripātamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Krishna Chaitanyam Ishwaram Harihi Om Tatsat Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tarale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So thank you all for joining in for our study session today. Today we're going to start chapter number 13. So yesterday we saw in the 12th chapter, Krishna declares that Bhakti Yoga is the best, devotional service to me is the best way to know me, to understand me, to come back to me, right? But then Arjuna again has a query. Now Arjuna wants to understand 5 subject matters, right? What are those 5 subject matters? That is what will be the first shloka of the 13th chapter entitled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. So let's go ahead and start. Okay, Shobha Mataji, go ahead. Text 1 to 2.
Krishna Dandot Pranamataji, the Prabhupada Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetra Jnanam Eva Cha Etat Vetim Ichchami Jnanam Che Jneyam Che Kesava Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetram Iti Abhidhiyate Etat Yo Veti Tat Prahur Kshetrajnana iti tat vidah. Synonyms. Arjuna Vacha. Arjuna said, Prakritim, nature, Purusham, the enjoyer, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Kshetram, the field, Kshetrajnanam, the knower of the field, Eva, certainly, Cha, also, Etat, all this, Veditum, to understand, Ichchami, I wish, Jnanam, knowledge, Jneyam, the object of knowledge, Cha, also, Keshava, O Krishna, Shri Bhagavan Vacha. The personality of Godhead said, Itam, this Shariram, body, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Kshetram, the field, iti, thus abhijiyate, is called. Etat, this yaha, one who, veti, knows, tam, he, prahuhu, is called. Kshetra jnana, the knower of the field, iti, thus tat pitaha, by those who knows this. Translation purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. Arjuna said, "Oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Kshetra, the field, Kshetra Jnana, its knower, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all this, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows the body is called the knower of the field. This body is called a field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned souls want to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra or the field of activity for the conditioned souls. Now, the person who should not identify himself with the body is called Kshetra Jnana, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult. The knower of the field, it is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of body and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual the field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehinosmin, that the living entity is within the body and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth and from youth to old age. And the person who knows the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetra Jnana. Sometimes he thinks, I am happy, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. There are the bodily designations. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles or clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called Kshetrajna, the knower of the field of the activities, and the body is called the Kshetra, the field of activities itself. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regards to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities as the districts. Those in want of money, the inquisits, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entities come into contact with material nature and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This also is explained. Haribol, Dandavat Pranam Mataji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Dandavat Pranam. So, 5 subject matters are discussed here, right? We all know from the 2nd chapter that I am the spirit soul and I have this material body according to my past karmas and past actions and desires. Right? Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatrana muyati. Right? Dhiras tatrana muyati means a sober person does not get bewildered by the change of this body. Just like we change our body every second from childhood to just from being a child to being a toddler to being a youth to being an old man or an old woman, and finally the sixth change, right? The six changes are described as being born, and then we grow, and then we maintain ourselves, and then we produce byproducts, and then we dwindle, and then we die, right? This death, what we call as a change of body, right? The soul changes from one body to another body, right? This body, what we have to carry out our desires, to perform our activities, this is called the kshetra. Kshetra means this body, the field of activity. And Kshetrajna means the person who is the knower of the field. Who is the knower of the field? The Jiva is the knower of the field. I know what is happening in my body. My head is aching, or I'm desiring to eat now, right? So I know what are the emotions, what are the things that are happening in my Kshetra. So Kshetra is the body. Kshetrajna refers to the knower of the body, who is myself. And then Prakriti. Prakriti is this nature, this material world which has been created by the Lord for us to try to enjoy ourselves, right? But we will be able to enjoy only when we know who is the Purusha. Who is the Purusha? Ekala, Ishvara, Krishna, or a Sabhabritya. So Krishna is the Purusha, the enjoyer, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Nyayam is the object of knowledge. Who is the object of knowledge? The one to be known as Krishna, the Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this body is Kshetram. So there are 5 things that are described in this verse. Prakriti, nature. Purusha, enjoyer. Kshetra, this body. Kshetrajna is the Jiva, or the knower of the field, which is myself. And Nyayam is the object of knowledge. Who is the object of knowledge? The object of knowledge is the one whom we are studying, whom we are trying to understand through the study of the Bhagavad Gita. Who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Who is Krishna? What is my relationship with him? What is the process that I have to do to reawaken my relationship with him? And what is the final object of knowledge? Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Prayojana is Krishna Prema. So to understand the Lord, our relationship with the Lord, and to act in our capacity of our relationship with the Lord, that is the object of knowledge. All right, let's move forward. Text number 3. Okay, Rajneesh Prabhu, go ahead. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi. Text number 3.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarv kshetreshu bharat kshetra kshetrajyor jnanam yat jnanam synonymous. Kshetrajnanam, the knower of the field. Sa
There's some disturbing sound is coming.
Sa also, api, certainly, mam, vidhi, no, sarva, all, kshetreshu, in bodily field, bharata, O son of Bharat, kshetra, the field of activities, the body, kshetra, jnana, the knower of the field, jnanam, knowledge of, yat, that which, tat, that, jnanam, knowledge, matam, opinion, mama, my, translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada said. Ocean of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the owner, I am also the knower of all in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Purpose. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the super soul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and the matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls, the individual soul and the super soul. Because the super soul is the planetary expansion of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super knower. I am present in everybody as the Paramatma or super soul. one who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad Gita can attain to the knowledge, can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in the knowledge of another of other body. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as super soul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but also the properties possessed by the individual citizen. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is secondary proprietor. Similarly, Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh, which means the controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all states. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Vedic literature, it is stated as follows. Chitrani sharirani vijam vijam sapi subhe kani veti sa yoga this body is called Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body, Super Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the owner. He is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literature as Ya. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and super soul as one, yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purush, the enjoyer of the nature, and Ishwar, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of the activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of the nature is the living entity, and above them both in the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in Vedic language, in the Vedic language, in the Sastara, in the Svesvatara, Svestara in Punish 1.12, Bhokta, Bhogyam, Parit, Paritram, Sa Matva, or Sarvam.
भोक्ता भोग्यं प्रेरितारं च मत्वा सर्वं प्रोक्तं त्रिविधं ब्रह्ममेतत्.
There are three Brahman concepts. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva, spiritual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature, and the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the in this chapter it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, One is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is faultless. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of the one who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in the knowledge. Is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies and there are different owners of the bodies because each individual soul has his individual capacity for lording it over individual nature. There are different bodies, but the Supreme also is present in them as controller. The word Sa is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Sri Baldev Vidya Bhushan. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that the real knowledge is to know that super soul is the author of both the field of activities and finite enjoy. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So, there are three concepts that are explained here. Bhagavad Gita itself talks about 5 subject matters: Prakriti, Purusha, Jiva, Kala, and Karma. Right? These 5 activities. Especially here, 3 aspects are very, very clearly defined here, which is Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. Right? Ishvara is the sanctioner. Jiva is the Ishvara is a factual controller, supreme controller, the controller of the Jiva also. The Jiva is a partial controller. He is able to control what is happening in his body, right? So this Kshetra, there is Kshetrajna, and then there is a supreme Kshetrajna. Why? Kshetra is the body. I know what is happening in my body, right? What I need, what I want to do, what are my desires, right? And I engage. I am the controller of this body. If I want to get up and walk, I will walk. If I want to read, I will read. If I want to raise my hand to study, I will study. I will raise my hand. If I don't want to raise my hand, I will not raise my hand. If I want to switch on my camera, I will switch on my camera. Otherwise, I will not switch on my camera. Isn't it? So I have the free will, I have the control over my body. Isn't it? What I want to do. So I am a Kshetrajna, but I am a Kshetrajna to a very limited extent. Right? Can I on Shobha Mataji's camera? Can I switch off Shobha Mataji's camera? I cannot. I can only have the control over what I want to do or what I can do. I cannot have control over what Shobha Mataji should do. Isn't it? Similarly, Shobha Mataji cannot have control over what I can do. Isn't it? So we are all individually Kshetrajnas, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present as a super soul in each of our bodies, and therefore he is the Supreme Controller. He is the controller of Shobha Mataji also. He is the controller of Medhamani Sakhi Devidasi also. So in that way, the Lord is the supreme controller, whereas the Jiva are individual, small controllers, and Prakriti is only executing based on the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this body is the field of activity, where this body is also made like that of Prakriti. It is made up of earth, water, fire, air, ether, isn't it? So Prakriti is also made up of these activities only. So the field of activities represents Prakriti or this body, and the Jiva represents individual soul, who is a minuscule controller, right? And the Ishvara or Bhagavan is the supreme factual controller. So that is what we need to understand. So Krishna is the super soul or is the controller of both the Jiva as well as the Kshetra or the field of activities, whereas the Jiva is only the controller of the limited Kshetra, which is only the limited his body he is able to control. That also we are not able to control, isn't it? Are we able to control our breath? Are we able to control our breathing? Are we able to control our, if we need to, if there's nature's call, we have to rush, right? Do we have any control, right? Most of the activities are happening on its own, and we are forced to do certain activities, although we may not want to do them. Right? So very limited control over the body that we have, and therefore we are a limited controller, whereas the Supreme Lord is the infinite enjoyer. The Jiva is a finite enjoyer, and Prakriti is the field of activity, or the body is the field of activity, like that. All right, let's move forward. Text number 4. Shri Priya Mataji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, pranams. Tatshetram yascha yadrikacha yad vikari yatascha yad sachayo yad prabhavascha tat samasena me shunu. Synonyms. That kshetram, field of activities, yet what, cha also, yadrik as it is, cha also, yet having what, vikari changes, yatah from which, cha also, yet what, sa he, cha also, ya who, yet having that what, prabhava influence, cha also, that, samasena in summary, me from me, shunu understand. Translation. Now, please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, when it is produced, who that knower of the field of activity is, and what his influences are. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in the constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the super soul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everybody to be one with the individual soul, the Jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. Hare Krishna ji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described. What did he describe? Achintya abeda beda tattva. Right? Prabhupada gives the example so many times in several of his lectures. Right? Prabhupada says, the drop of the ocean and the ocean itself, they have the same chemical composition, the same the salt and whatever else is contained in the drop of the water in the ocean is equal to what is contained in the entire ocean, right? There is no extra chemical which is there, right? The composition is the same. But in terms of the quantity, a drop is just a drop. It cannot do anything. Whereas the ocean is so much of quantity that it can flood the entire place, isn't it? So in terms of quality, we are equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas in quantity, we are minuscule, whereas the Supreme Lord is infinite. Another example Prabhupada gives is the spark of fire and the fire itself. A spark of fire, right? If a spark of fire falls on us, it will only create a dot, right? It'll burn to an extent of, a small dot in our hand, right? If a spark of fire touches our, like when we do the crackers on Diwali, right? Sometimes one spark may just come and land on our hand, and what happens? There is one dark spot, right? That is the damage that the spark can create. Whereas, if the entire house is on fire, then everything burns, right? The people, the things, and everything gets burnt, right? So that is the impact of the fire. That is the impact or the quantity of the fire. And whereas that is the impact of a spark of the fire. Whereas the spark is a minuscule, whereas the fire itself is so infinite. It can eat up everything, right? The digestion fire also we need that fire in our body also to digest what we eat, isn't it? So the magnitude of the fire, right, of the jiva is said to be minuscule, whereas that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is said to be infinite. So at no point of time should we consider the jiva to be equal to the Supreme Lord. Yes, the jiva is equal to the extent of the quality, right? We also have the same qualities as that of the Lord, because we cannot have anything that is not there in the Supreme Lord. Whatever the Lord has, we also have, but the Lord has in infinite quantities, whereas we have those same qualities in very, very minute proportions, like that. All right, let's move ahead. Okay, text number 5. Who'll read? Sudha Mataji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandat Pranam. Yes, Mataji.
ऋषिभिर् बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदैश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः. Synonyms by the wise sages. Bahuda, in many ways. Geetam, described. Chandobi, by Vedic hymns. Vividai, various, Pratak, variously, Brahma Sutra of the Vedanta, Padai, by the aphorisms, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Hetu Madbi, with cause and effect, Vinishchitai, certain. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada ki Jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First, he says this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tatanye. We, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul and the soul, the super soul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parashara is considered principal among them. The word Chandobi refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the supreme personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of Kshetrajna, the individual living entity and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.9, Brahma Pucham Pratishta, there is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and the supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the all blissful nature. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Pucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Dhyanamaya, involve the field of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamayo Abhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. To enjoy this, his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Dhyanamaya, and Annamaya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are Na Viyat Ashrute 2.3.2, Natma Shrute 2.3.18, and Paratu Tach Shrute 2.3.40. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, the second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord. the summum bonum among all the manifestations of various entities. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. So, very nicely, the three aspects are again described. The Prakriti, Jiva, and Ishvara. Right? Prakriti is Naviyad Ashrutehe. That means the field of activities. Natma Ashrutehe. That means the living entity. The living entity is the controller of the material nature. And Parat, what is transcendental? Parat Tachrutehe. That indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the summum bonum of all the manifestations of various entities, which includes the jiva as well as the field of activities. The Supreme Lord is in control of both the living entity as well as the field of activities. The living entity, to a limited extent, has control over the field of activities, right? And then the 5 koshas are described, very beautiful. Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Jnanamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, and Anandamaya kosha. And we are all seeking happiness. Because we are all amshas of the Lord, we all want to be happy. That's why abhyasat, we are always trying to attain happiness. Anandamayo abhyasat. Right? We all want to be happy. But if we dovetail our propensity to become happy, whatever we want to do, if we do it for the pleasure of the Lord, and in the pleasure of the Lord, if we derive our happiness, then that will result in real happiness. Otherwise, in this material world, we will only become frustrated with all our attempts to enjoy, independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like that. All right, let's move ahead. Text number 6 to 7. Who wants to read? Sharpavalli Mataji, want to read? Text 6 to 7. Okay, now Kishori Mataji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Oh, okay,
Mataji,
okay,
can you
okay.
please recite sloka?
Okay, yeah, Karpavali Mataji, you can read next verse number 8. I just saw you. Okay, because your voice was not audible, you can check your audio also. Mahabhutani hankaro buddhiravyaktamev cha indriyani dashaikam cha pancha chendriya gocharaah ichha dvesha sukham dukkham sangatas chetana dhritihi etat kshetram samasena sa vikaram udahritam. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, phenomenon. Mahabhutani, the great elements, ahankaran, false ego, buddhihi, intelligent or vacuum, the manifested, eva, certainly, cha, also indriyani, the senses, dasa, ekam, 11, cha, also pancha, 5, cha, also indriya, grow, charaha, the object of the senses, icha, desire, deve, dveshaha, hatred, sukham, happiness, dukham, distress, sangataha, the aggregate chetana, living symptoms, drityaha, conviction, etata, all these kshetram, the field of activities, samshena, samasena, the summary. Yes, Mataji. Sa Vikram with interaction, udaritam, exemplified. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The 5 great elements, false, ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind. The 5 sense object, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms of and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport from all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra. The components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are the 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false, ego, intelligent, and unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge and knowledge. The eyes, ears, nose, tongues, and skin. The 5 working senses: voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is the mind which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Note the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes the analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions representation of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms represented by consciousness and the convictions are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. The subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego. Technically called the materialistic conception or tamas buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhana. One who desire to know the 24 elements in detail along with their interactions should study the philosophy in more details. In Bhagavad Gita summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in numbers. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material things. However, the kshetrajna, the knower of the field, is a proprietor, is different. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Done.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So here there is a distinction between the body as well as the soul is given here, right? So what is the body? The body is just composed of earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the 25 elements are also described, right? The 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 sense objects. 5 plus 5 plus 5 becomes 15, and then there is earth, water, fire, air, ether, which is the gross elements, which is 20, and then you have the mind, intelligence, and the false ego, which is 23, and then you have the unmanifested called the pradhana, right? That's 24th, and 25th element is the soul, right? This soul is the distinct element, different from all the others. Why? All the other 24 elements, right? They are subject to change. That means what? Even if you take the body is made up of earth, water, fire, and ether, right? The body consists of the 5 sense organs. Then there is the 5 objects of senses. Then there is mind, intelligence, and false ego. There is a pradhana. All of these are subject to change, right? Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara prapte dhiras tatrana muyati. That's dhira is referring to the living entity, whereas the 24 elements refer to the Jada or the Prakriti, right? So they are all subject to 6 changes, right? It's born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, it decays, and it dies, right? These 6 changes are happening, and at the end, that's why it is said they are all temporary, right? Everything is temporary, right? This material creation itself is temporary. It's not false, but it is temporary because it is going to be annihilated and then it is going to get recreated. Whereas the kshetrajna, that means the knower of the body, which is the jiva or the soul is najayate mrete vakadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va nabhuyaha ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. When the sharira dies, right? When the sharir is the body, when the body dies, what does the soul do? The soul simply goes into another body. Or when the soul, the jiva perfects its life, it goes back and acquires a spiritual body and goes back to the spiritual world. So the kshetrajna is different in the sense the kshetrajna is eternal, whereas the kshetra or the body, right, composed of the 24 elements, they are all subject to destruction. They are all subject to annihilation. Therefore, they are all temporary. All right, let's move forward. Text number 8 to 12. With this, we'll end. Karpagavali Mataji, go ahead. 8 to 12. Okay, I'll read the verse.
Thank you, Mataji.
Should I read the verse or you want to read?
I want to read, Mataji.
Yeah, read it. Yeah.
Amanitvam adam vitvam ahimsa sanit adjavam पासानां शौचं तराम् आत्मविनि
उपासनम् आचार्यो उपासनं शौचम्
आचार्य उपासनां शौचं चार्याम्
आत्मविनिग्रहः
धैर्यम् आत्मविनिग्रहः
इन्द्रियार्थेषु वैराग्यम्
इन्द्रियासु वैराग्यम्
अहङ्कार एव च
अहङ्कार एव च
जन्म
व्याधि दुःखास्तोष
दुःखदोषानुदर्शनम्
दुःखदोष अनुष्ठदम्
असक्तिरेण विश्वङ्गः
असक्तिरनभिस्वाङ्ग पुत्राधारगतिषु नित्यं चित्तवम् इष्टानिष्टोपपत्तिषु मायि कन्या
मयि च अनन्ययोगेन
मयि च अनन्ययोगेन
व्यभिचारिणी
व्यक्तिचारिणी सेवाक्यम् अराज्ञान संसदि अध्यात्मज्ञान नित्यवाम तत्त्वज्ञान न अनर्थ तत्सनम् इदाज्ञानम् प्रोक्तम् अज्ञानं यत् अधो न्यायता Synonyms amanitvam, humility, adambitvam, pridelessness, ahimsa, non-violence, santit, tolerance, abjavam, simplicity, acharya upasanam, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, chaucham, cleanliness, sairiam, steadfastness, atma vinigraha, self-control, indriyani, artesu, in the matter of senses, vairagyam, renunciation, anakankara, being without false.
Ahankara means false ego. Anahankara means without false ego.
Anakankara, without being false egoism. Eva, certainly, Icha also, Janma of birth, Mrityu, death, Jara, old age, Vyadi and disease, Dukkha of the distress, those are the faults. Anu Darsanam, observing Sakti, being without attachment. Anabhishvanga, being without association. Putra, for son, Dara, wife. Garad, Adishti, whom, etc. Nityam, constant, also. Sama, sit from equilibrium. Ishta, the desirable, Anishta, and undesirable. Upastisu, having been. Mayi, Antony, Cha also. Ananya Yogino, by unalloyed devotion service. Bhakti, devotion. Avyadi Charini, without any break. Vivikta, to solitude, desa, places. Sevitvam, aspiring. Arati, being without any attachment. Jnana samsadi, to people in general. Jana samsadi, to people in general. Jana samsadi, to people in general. Athyatma, pertaining to the self. Jnana, in knowledge. Nityaptam, constancy. Tattva jnana, of knowledge of the truth. Artha, for the object. Darsana, philosophy. Itat, orbit. Jnanam, knowledge. Iti, tas, proktam, declared. Ajnanam, ignorance. Yes, that which. From this, anyata, other. Translation by Prabhupada Kiji. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the subjects of the sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness, and the pleasant and unpleasant even constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in the solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and the philosophy search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever they may be, is ignorance. Purport. This process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of 24 elements as described above. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a which is a casing made of the 24 elements, and the process of knowledge as described here is the means to get out of it. Of all the description of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of 11th verse. Mayi
charanya yogina bhaktir abhyabhicharini.
Bhakti abhyabhicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So, if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes the devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12, all the good qualities of knowledge develop in those who have attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for those who take to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts the bona fide spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna clearly says here that this process of knowledge is the actual part. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. As far as knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, one who knows that he is not this body, anything honor or dishonor pertaining to the body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As far actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have to test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. Non-violence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually non-violence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pain. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they can become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is non-violence. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, Mataji was endangered when his father became antagonist to his devotion.
Mataji, you left one line. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others.
This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlada, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonist to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlada tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, and we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As far as acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, One cannot progress in the spiritual sense. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessing upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciples, that will take the disciple and immediately advance without the disciples following the regulative principles. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without the several chains. Cleanliness is essential for making advancements in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking bath for internal cleanliness, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleanses the accumulated dust for past karma from the mind. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot take tangible progress. And self-control means one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not unnecessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing the spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna that will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service. And if it is understood, here the Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. False ego means accepting this body as oneself, and one understands he is not his body and his spirit soul. He comes to his real ego. Ego is there, false ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, Bragat Aranyaka, Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit, and this I am is the sense of self also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, and when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to the reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say that we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with the body. One should try to understand that this is accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in the various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of unborn, the child stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother. We do not make any resolution, any solution. We do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. As far as the disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding this. Unless we have a sick view of this material life, considering the diseases of birth, death, old age, and the disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. As for detachment from the children, wife, and home, it does not mean that one should have no feeling for this. They are natural objects of affection. But when they are not favorable for true spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process of making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is full of Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Accept the remnants of footsteps offered to Krishna. Have some discussion on books like Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These four things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. So one can mold his life, one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness. Follow these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to this life. But if one cannot congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abundant. One must sacrifice everything to realize or serve God, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life, because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Happiness and distress are concomitant factors of material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad Gita. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. So one should be detached from the materialistic way of life and be automatically equiposed in both cases. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy. And when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in this spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that sense, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in 9 processes of devotional service: chanting, hearing, worshipping, offering respect, etc., as described in the last verse in 9th chapter. That process should be followed. Actually, when one is adapted to this spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. That would go against his doing. One may test himself by seeing how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary supporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function, because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject. According to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discussion to the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand the self that is recommended here. As far as the self-realization is concerned, it is clearly stated that the Bhakti Yoga is especially practical. As soon as there is a question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the super soul cannot be one, at least not in the Bhakti conception. The devotional conception of life and devotional conception of life. This service of the individual soul to the Supreme Soul is eternal. Nityam, as it is clearly stated. So Bhakti or devotional service is eternal. One should be established in that philosophical conviction. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11, this is explained. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tatsamya
Advayam.
Advayam. Those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in 3 different phases as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. Bhagwan is the last word in the realization of absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up on the platform, up to that platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus engage in the devotional service of the Lord. This is the perfection of knowledge, beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the Supreme Truth, the Absolute, to a personality of Godhead. This process is just like a staircase, beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached up the first floor, the second floor, or third floor, etc. But unless one reaches up the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone who completes with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think of oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks I am God because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know that and be convinced of this truth. Thank you, Mataji.
Very good. Very nice. Thank you so much, Karpagoli Mataji. Very beautiful. Very beautifully written. So, very, very important quality given by Krishna in this verse. Very, very important qualities. It starts with amanitva. Amanitva means not expecting any respect for oneself, right? And also becoming humble. Humble means to know oneself as, being the servant of the others, right? Whatever knowledge, skills that has been given to us by the Supreme Personality of God, it has to be put in the proper use. What is the proper use? The proper use is to be engaged in the service of the Lord as well as his devotees. Amanitvam, that is the starting, humility. And adambitvam is pridelessness. That means not thinking, oh, I know everything. I am only doing everything. That is adam, damba, darpa, like that. Na? There's another verse which says that what are the qualities of people who are demonic? Damba, darpa. That means pride and false ego. These are the qualities of the demoniac. Whereas amanitvam and madambitvam, that means humility and pridelessness. These are the qualities that are very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so much of wonderful, detailed purport is given by Prabhupada here, right? Violence means to cause. We know, as per the English dictionary, we think violence means is to cause some kind of injury. But Prabhupada is explaining here how in this material world we are all suffering. So if we are not preaching the message of Krishna consciousness to others, then we are engaging in violence. Right? Very beautiful explanation. We should read these verses. We should memorize these verses, and we should read these verses with the translation and purport of Prabhupada as many times as possible. Right? And of course, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Dosha, and Darshanam. We are always facing birth, death, disease, and old age in this material world. But yet, we think that, we want to continue living in this world and want to try to enjoy in this material world. And that is our foolishness. That is being under illusion. Right? And what is the way to get out of this? Ananya yogena bhakti avyabhicharini. That means unalloyed devotional service. Avyabhicharini means without any break. It's not that when I want, I will do devotional service. When I want, I will watch TV. When I want, I will watch TV serial. When I want, I will watch cricket match. Right? That is not the way. They have to be continuously engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? Darshanam etad jnanam iti proktam ajnanam. That which does not result in these qualities is only because of ignorance. It is only because of ignorance we think that we can enjoy in this material world. It is only because of ignorance that we think we can, we derive pleasure in doing all of these sense gratificatory activities. But in development of all these good qualities, that is starting with adambitvam, starting with humility, pridelessness, going up to self-realization. This is what the human form of life is meant for. And we can attain happiness only when we are engaged in developing these qualities. How do we develop these qualities? Yastyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvair gunais satra samasati sura. If we simply engage in unmotivated, uninterrupted service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all of these good qualities, beginning with humility, up to, pridelessness, non-violence, charity, and all these good qualities will automatically develop in a person who's engaged in devotional service. That's what is explained very beautifully in this long purport by Prabhupada, which was very beautifully read by Karpagoli Mataji. So thank you very much, dear devotees. Dandavat pranams. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Srila Gurudev ki jai. We'll do Harinam Sankirtan, and as always, I will request devotees to give your darshan. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi पाश्चात्यारीशतारिणे जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्दा श्री अद्वैता धर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्त वृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय राधा रमण हरि गोविंद जय 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 गौरनिताय जय जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रमा जय सुदर्शन जय बाल गोपाल जय रुक्मिणी विठल जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय रुक्मिणी विठल जय राधा कृष्ण जय राधा माधव जय राधा श्याम सुंदर जय राधा मदन मोहन जय राधा गोविंद जय राधा गोपीनाथ जय राधे राधे जय राधे राधे जय राधे राधे जय श्री राधे जय गुरु परंपरा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल जय नाम संकीर्तन की जय जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद श्रील गुरुदेव की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णवावृंद की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. So sincere gratitude to all of you. We are well about 20 minutes over time. So thank you all very much for your kind patience and tolerance, and sorry for extending beyond the timelines. Thank you very much, because these qualities were so wonderful. We thought, we will complete it in one sitting. These are qualities that we need to meditate all the time. We need to develop all these qualities if we need to become dear to the Lord. So the Lord is personally giving these qualities that we need to develop so that we may become dear to Him. So we should meditate on these qualities and try to imbibe these qualities, keeping devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the center. That is what is most important. All right, so I'm having darshan of all the wonderful devotees who joined us today. Shobha Mataji, Harjeet Mataji, and her little son Namesh, Karpagavalli Mataji, Anjana Mataji, Gopi Geet Mataji, Anusha Mataji, Rajneesh Prabhu, Nisha Mataji, Nagveni Mataji, Manasi Mataji, Navkishori Mataji, Drishti Mataji, Leela Nandini Mataji. Thank you very much for joining in. Vanchakalpatarobhyascha कृपा सिंधु पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. श्रील प्रभुपाद श्रील गुरुदेव की जय. निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे. हरि हरि बोल. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. We'll meet at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning for the study of Bhagavad Gita. I see no hands up, so I believe everything is very clear. And whatever we've discussed, you all know what are the qualities we need to develop. So we need to introspect what we are lacking, and we try to develop those qualities so that we become dear to Lord Sri Krishna. So yeah, thank you very much. Tomorrow we will continue with, tomorrow it's Ekadashi, yeah. So tomorrow we will have special Ekadashi session. Tomorrow we are starting Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the book, the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the wonderful pastimes, how Prabhupada explains, the Lord is a Lord even when he is a small child. Nobody can become the Lord by simple, by performing any meditation, Ashtanga Yoga, etc. So In this way, there's be a wonderful combination of the philosophy as well as wonderful pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. Please do join us definitely from 12:30 tomorrow, 12:30 to 1:30 or 12:45 to 1:45 as the case may be. We will meet to start the most wonderful book, Krishna book, on the most auspicious day of Ekadashi. And also, we will take the Sankalpa tonight itself. We'll open the Ekadashi Sankalpa group tonight. So please do take your Sankalpa, chant extra rounds. Chaturmasya Vrata begins tomorrow. The 4 months of rainy season begins tomorrow. So more opportunity for us to engage more in devotional service so as to attract the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. Thank you very much. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Srila Gurudev ki jai. Itai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you. Hare Krishna.